Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hi everyone, I was honored to have this Facebook Live conversation with three incredible women to celebrate Pride Month back in June. Dr. Catherine Davis was a professor and administrator at universities in both Canada and the United States, teaching biomechanics and anatomy. She is also a founding member of the Trans Chorus of Los Angeles. After attempting to transition in the early 1990s, Dr. Davis was forced to detransition, having lost her job, and in order to find work to support her children. Dr. Davis made her final transition in 2015 at the age of 70, having gender affirmation surgery in 2016, and has since lived as her authentic self. Alexa Best is a trans actress and filmmaker based in Los Angeles. She began making films because trans women historically have not had a lot of agency over their own stories. That's why she believes it's so important to have films about trans women directed by trans women. It's not only representation, but also a point of view that needs to be seen. Alexa's recently completed short film, Emotional Labor, begins its festival run later this year. Maggie Szabo is a rising pop songstress who has been extremely busy releasing a series of high-profile singles. The audio of her recent single, Worth the Wait, was exclusively premiered by Rolling Stone India and the music video by Celeb Mix. Maggie has also been making waves on prominent Spotify playlists worldwide. By working with organizations such as the Trans Chorus of Los Angeles, Maggie uses her music and online presence to conquer social injustice. I had a lovely discussion with all three women about their lives and the song Rebuild that tells the story of Dr. Catherine Davis. If you enjoyed this conversation, my favor as usual is to please share this podcast with others. It would mean so much if you'd also rate it and leave me feedback. And if you'd like to help keep this podcast going, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. You can donate as little as $1 per month, and I would certainly appreciate it. For comments or suggestions, email me at sifumimichan@gmail.com or reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now, on with the show. Hi, everybody. Happy Pride Month. I am honored to introduce you to this incredible panel today, Dr. Catherine Davis, Maggie Szabo, and Alexa Best. International pop songstress Maggie Szabo just released a music video called Rebuild, directed by Alexa Best and starring Dr. Catherine Davis. It follows Dr. Davis's story in photographs from birth to losing her job and being forced to detransition in the 1990s in order to continue to feed her family. After a nearly fatal emergency surgery, Dr. Davis received her wake-up call. She finally transitioned in 2016 at the age of 70 and is now living as her true, authentic self. She is a prominent member of the LGBTQ plus community in Los Angeles and a founding member of the Trans Chorus of Los Angeles. Alexa recently completed the short film Emotional Labor, which begins its festival run later this year. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, you are all on the West Coast, so I apologize. You had to wake up much earlier than I am here over on the East Coast. So again, we spoke a little off air. We're having our tea, coffee, or beverage of morning beverage of choice together. And I have no judgment. Whatever that is, go for it. So I'm going to actually start off with Catherine. If you could please just kind of share a little bit. I was so moved by your story and the beautiful retelling of it through the music video Rebuild. Can you share what it was like for you in the 90s when you first tried to transition?
Well, it was an interesting journey at that time. I had, I've known since I was like 3 or 4 years old that I really wasn't the boy that everyone told me I was. I joined a group in the 80s in Toronto where I was living for support and that, and started to transition shortly after and into the 90s. So I was transitioning and I went to my workplace and they said, well, that's very nice. We'll see you later. And essentially, gave me a little handshake and a severance package and sent me out the door. I tried to get jobs and I was unable to. And I had 2 small children at the time who needed me and I needed them. So I decided, with the help of my therapist and some others, to detransition and stop transitioning. And I went through, I stopped hormone therapy, and I had double mastectomy. And there's an interesting story with that. When I went into the doctor that was doing the mastectomy, he said, "How long have you been living as a man?" And I said, because he thought I was a female to male transitioning.
Oh, okay.
I said, "Unfortunately, my whole life." And he kind of looked at me, and it was a silly moment, but it was a difficult choice, but one that I had to make. My family, my children are the most important thing in my life. And I was able to detransition. I was able to then resume my career and change a little bit within my career to a consulting role from a teaching and administrative role. So it was difficult. Yes, I had a lot of support, but I think also it was something I had to do at that time, and to continue on and support my family.
Yeah, well, it's so brave, but also selfless, and it's something that I think is just really commendable. So I want to get into a little bit later, kind of where fast forward and the difference between the company back then and the one now, and how your job has evolved. But Alexa, Catherine's story has such a complex history, as she just shared. And what was your approach to telling the story within a few minutes in Rebuild? Because you're trying to capture so much, and you do so beautifully, but it must have been a challenge. And tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, trans lives are often very complex. They're not always linear, and they're not always, easy to kind of package. I knew that in 3 minutes that we couldn't tell the whole story. So really, I think first and foremost, I wanted to make sure we hit the emotional impact that her story can have. And really started out by listening to Maggie's song again and again and again, just to kind of feel the emotions of the song. And there's kind of a journey that the song takes us on. And I actually was kind of, I had been introduced to Catherine's story before I really got to dig into the pictures. So I kind of had heard the story, listened to the song, thought about, kind of had come up with the treatment for the video that way. And then, when I actually got to the pictures, then you're also working with what was actually captured photographically.
Yeah.
And then there's some beautiful things with the photos, like there's some Polaroids, which have a really great look to them. There's the black and whites from when Catherine was a small child. And so just visually or aesthetically, those things had a certain charge and feeling, in the types of different photographs, the different periods of time. And so you're working, in some ways, the limitations are also something that come into the process, because I really wanted to avoid using text as much as possible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So Catherine's story is fascinating. It's got so many amazing elements. But also what do we have photographs of? And what can easily be seen quickly and create some kind of meaning for the viewer. So it was just kind of piecing that together. And then I think the story of, we got together, Catherine and Maggie and I, to look at the photographs. And because Catherine and Maggie have this beautiful friendship, watching, them share the photographs and the pleasure of it, that became part of the story I wanted to tell. Also, I thought that was so beautiful. And really, a lot of times when we talk about trans stories and complexity and trying to share these histories, we get rooted in kind of grief and pain. And really to see the pleasure and joy in sharing, especially when you have someone who understands, kind of gets you and can understand, the journey it took to get here, as opposed to trying to define, your life by these pictures of you, maybe when you weren't able to express yourself. I think that's a really important part of the story that, is ultimately kind of the arrival point for the video.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, Maggie will love the song. Like Alexa just shared, normally you're kind of feeling this kind of sorrow and grief and pain when you think and you hear about trans stories, because it's always rooted in all of those challenges. But I loved the part in the video where you kind of walk up and you smile and you see your friend, and there's just this embrace and this friendship, and it kind of takes you out of that, and it's just like, no, this is just about love and friendship and the authenticity. And so your friendship is very clear in the music video that it's not just acting and you're in a music video. So tell me a little about your relationship with Catherine and the work with the Transcourse of LA.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you. And it's funny because the phrase that Catherine and Abdullah from Transcourse of LA always uses is from victim to victorious. And I think for me, I wanted to try and show that instead of course, there's a story here that is difficult, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, but I really also wanted to show the strength and the perseverance in it. And Catherine and I met a couple years ago. Once I started working with the Transcourse of LA, Catherine and I met, and we instantly became friends. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're both Canadian, and it's always so funny because, I mean, I've been in LA for like 7 years, and Catherine's been here longer than I've been here. But there's something about like when you meet another Canadian here, you like instantly become friends. And with Catherine and I, like it was like in a minute, we're like, oh my gosh, and talking like we've been friends forever. And every time I see Catherine, it's it's that thing, and it's genuine. And there's something that I feel like deep down, like when you grow up in a similar area, especially it's a different country, and there's something that kind of bonds you. So I think that's a lot of the reason why we initially started becoming such great friends. And as time, of course, went on and I got to know Catherine more, I have always been inspired by her story and the fact that she comes out of it with such strength. And even the story that she was just telling like 10 minutes ago at the doctor's office, like she finds the humor and the smiles in like everything. And with all parts of life, like I want to live by that and like find the joy in everything. So really at the end of the day, I couldn't imagine a more inspiring story to tell for this. And Rebuild was written about 1.5 years ago. And when it came time to really figuring out like, what should we be doing for this video? It was just kind of an obvious choice that, Catherine's story is the best thing for this.
Yeah. It's really beautiful. And congrats, of course, on all of your success on Spotify and just that whole international market. I think it's amazing. You have a beautiful voice. And have you always wanted to be a singer, or is this just from when you moved to LA?
Always. Since I was like, 3 years old, I knew I wanted to do music, and I knew singing and songwriting was kind of what I needed to do in order to keep going on. So that's what brought me out to LA like 7 years ago. I finally was able to move out here because as a Canadian, it can be a little bit tricky with like immigration and visas and stuff. So it's a process, but luckily I was able to come out here and it's, I've been here ever since.
Love it. And I love Canadians. I have family in Toronto and I go there all the time. So I'm all about it, all about Toronto. Everyone's so nice and pleasant. So it's great. And also just the blend of cultures and the diversity. Yeah. And I love the city there and the country as a whole. So yes, love the Canadians. Now, Catherine, What was it like for you when you first saw the full music video? Because it's one thing to be filming something and you're taking these shots and it's a long day. And we were talking off air. I think you were filming in April, and I'm sure it was a really long shoot day. And it's hard if you're not a filmmaker to like go, how is this going to piece together? You want me to stand where? And you're next to your bed. Okay, pick up your dress, put your dress down. It's like, what was it like when you finally saw the video?
Oh, when I finally saw the video, I loved it. Other than here's this beautiful young woman, Maggie, and this older woman who has just been through a pandemic and put on a few pounds. And no, it was beautiful. And Alexa did such a wonderful job in the directing the scenes when we were out there, but also choosing the pictures that she chose. It was fun to see some of my old pictures, me and my brother standing on the hood of an old Chevy car, and just all of those things, seeing my children as they grew up and sharing with them. I loved it. And then just that one, woke up. That was, yes, I did. I woke up finally. I am who I am. And, rebuilding your life is so important to most trans people, because we do have to do that. It's you're leaving something behind and moving ahead. I love the video. I love Maggie. She's a dear friend, and it's been such a joy to work with her. The first video we did together as the whole chorus with Maggie was don't give up on love, and how we have to embrace that. So it's a beautiful video. Technically, I'm not great at that stuff, and I have an expression when I go on these sets of, well, let's hurry up and wait, because that seems to be what I do when I go there.
All actors, stars, that is what you do. You hurry up and wait. And so you are obviously professional, and you have it down, because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And you did a great job of it. But I do it. Alexa or Maggie mentioned earlier that everything you, even challenging things, you have a lightheartedness, and even after you've been through so much, it's amazing that is your disposition. But you said something just now, which was like, oh, I finally had to wake up. And to me, I feel like you've always been awake, and it's all of us around that are the ones that aren't awake. And so I feel like you're very forgiving of the society that surrounds you, because I feel like that's really where there's more of an issue. Because of course, fast forward, the company that you are doing all of your work with, you said they were so supportive compared to that first experience. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like the night and day experience? Well,
I just wanted to mention, everyone's story is individual and unique and important. And I was, I'm really pleased that my story came out, but there are lots of other stories, one here as well that has a story that's quite unique and wonderful. But the difference was, 20 years, things have changed, people have grown. And my understanding, I had a serious medical issue in 2011 and almost died. And when I came out of that, I had a very peaceful feeling, knowing that I had to transition. My son my youngest son, who was living with me at the time, graduated from college the year after in 2012. I went to all my children and said, okay, you're all adults now. Here's me. This is what I'm going to do. Set out a plan, went to my company, and I essentially asked, I went to the head of our human resources department and said, this is what I'm going to do. How can you help me? I didn't go in with the sense of, oh, woe is me, please be kind to me. No, I couldn't do that. I wanted to go in with a strong attitude of, this is me. I need some help, obviously. Here's my plan as to what to do. She was amazing. Our human resources was absolutely amazing. Our company's been very embracing and wonderful. I do consulting work, so there was an issue with clients and how they would react. And we formulated a letter, sent that letter out to all clients. My best clients, I went and met personally and told them about what was going to happen. Did I lose any clients? Absolutely. I lost a whole bunch of clients. but I also gained some, and I gained a lot of respect from other clients, knowing what I was going through, and they were willing to stand by me. So I was very proud of them and proud of the fact that my company was willing to stand by me.
Right. And of course, professionally, that is something that you're rooted in and important. However, was it difficult for you to talk to your children and your close family? Like, was that a challenge, or did you feel like they would already be okay, or they already knew?
We have a very loving relationship, our family. They're pretty close. I have two families, really. I was married twice and have children from both marriages. But they're all very tight and close. My daughter still has a lot of trouble. She was very reluctant because she was losing her dad, she thought. But I've always told her, no, you haven't lost me. I'm still here. I just changed a little bit of what I look like. But she's struggled with it. She still finds it difficult. I just love her. I can't do anything else and support her. And that's all you can do. So, yeah, there's been, I think some people look at my life and say, well, you've had it pretty easy. No, I don't think any of us have it easy.
Certainly not. Certainly
trials
not.
And tribulations. But
Thank you so much for sharing.
Support from people like Maggie and lots of others are it's wonderful. And our community is blessed to have allies that are strong and willing to help us.
Absolutely. And now you did allude to, in which of course I'm getting to, Alexa, which for you, I would love to hear if you're open to sharing a little bit about your story and how maybe your own experiences played into directing, and how you do direct, trans stories, and even a music video like this. Like, does your personal experiences play into how you approach from an artistic standpoint? But also, if you're open to sharing, we, of course, I'd be honored to hear a little bit about your background as well.
Sure. I think the big difference between Catherine and my story is just I transitioned almost 2 decades ago. So it was a very different time. And, I think one of the big things about my story and my experience personally is that I was always, so much more information has come out in later years. I didn't really transition in within a trans or queer community. I was just immersed in my professional life and in the world at large. So I've often been the first trans person in whatever environment I've been in, and having to kind of to navigate that. Which I just think influences me, I think, as a filmmaker, because I'm not afraid to go in directions that haven't previously been gone in. I'm kind of grown used to that by now, even though information's coming out. And I think it's, it's also, there's a timeline where the progress to me feels extraordinarily slow. It's kind of amazing in some ways that as much has happened in my lifetime as has happened, but also 20 years is a really long time to still be kind of running into the same types of misinformation and people not getting it, and really not even having stories of people who've really gone that far beyond. A lot of times we're really focused on that moment of transition and the things people are going through, because that tends to be the stories that get the most coverage and where people are interested. And then they kind of drop off their interest with trans lives as we continue to have families and jobs and want to branch out into other avenues of life and develop. And, and a lot of times you're running into those assumptions of what people know. I think a lot of times it can feel like, it's, you run into people and it's like, what are you projecting onto me? And then you're just kind of working from that, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what you're coming in with. As a filmmaker, I think one of the shots that I feel most strongly about in the video is the one just of Catherine. All of her close-ups are great, but especially at the bridge of the song where we just kind of stay with her. And, I think as simple as it sounds, to create a space for her where I'm not projecting anything onto her. There's no thing I'm trying to make her be, and she can just exist, and we can share that moment where we can kind of see her eyes and her face in a very natural way. To me, that's like almost a radical breakthrough in trans representation, because so much of the time it's really there's so much weight on the messaging that you're trying to deliver using these human beings to deliver it. And so just to really, to me, I'm really interested in humanity first and foremost as a filmmaker, not only trans people, but, to be able to involve trans people in all of those aspects of humanity and really all the different facets of our lives, rather than the most obvious or the most exotic or whatever it is. And really where we have common ground and have the same, a lot of the same interests and needs as other people. I think that's really part of what drives me as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and clearly an amazing storyteller. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work. But I have a very small taste and inkling. I mentioned off air to everybody, I used to live in LA and I came back home. It just wasn't for me. But with the small set of experiences I had as a filmmaker, as well as an actor in quote unquote Hollywood, as a female and as an Asian female, right? We all like Catherine had said, everybody's got challenges of different kinds, and they're not all equal, and they're not all to be compared. But I totally know what that was like for me, and so I'm curious if you could share, because I think people need to really understand what those roadblocks are like. Like, what additional challenges do you face specifically because you are a trans woman in this field, right? Because I think people just don't. I don't want to say the word believe, but it's unfortunate. I think they actually just don't believe that this discrimination exists or inequality, that there's inequalities. And I'm sure that you could shed some light on that subject.
Sure. First of all, I just want to say, I'm so happy to be here with all of these amazing women. I also want to shout out my director of photography, Sarah Garth. Amazing. I mean, the video looks so good, and she's a huge part of that. And also Carolina Gutierrez, another trans woman who was our producer on the day and even helped with the choreography. It was just
yes, she did.
super multi-talented, amazing women. So I just want to make sure we shout them out. But I think you really, it's exactly what you say, which is it's like, there's just being a woman in Hollywood and then all the additional things that our individual experiences bring to it. I think one of the things that comes to mind is, Chloe Zhao just won the Golden Globes, and it was second woman to do so, first Asian woman to do so. And then you think about how many trans women directors that I know of that have had, and the answer is zero. So these are huge breakthroughs for women in general in the industry, but I look around and see a lot of the things I want to do, and I have literally zero, examples of people who've been able to accomplish that. And zero is just a number that, as much as when it's just one or two, we all know how overwhelming that can be. But when it's zero, it just hasn't happened. So that's a huge challenge, in that you're really trying to convince people that you have the ability to do those things and to get that recognition when they really have no precedent. And a lot of times people are just projecting onto you what they have seen or what they think that a trans person is, or what they do, or what their ability is. So I think underestimation is a huge part of what I'm up against. And I wanted to say that's one of the great things about working with Maggie. At no point in the whole process did Maggie ever, underestimate. I didn't feel like I was ever underestimated. I came with an idea. She loved it, and believed I could do it. And that was great. And I hate to say it, but that's unfortunately kind of a rare thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what they would call, when there's such a history of discrimination in the industry. I've been an artist, all of my adult life. And there were just years and years and years where we were completely shut out of the industry. Cis people were telling our stories, shooting, directing our movies, and even playing our parts in roles. And really the one of the landmarks for me is 2018, 3 years ago, which was when Scarlett Johansson was up for a trans male role. That was kind of like, to me, the pivot point in the industry where there was enough pushback where they were like, people were like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. There had already been some trans actors doing work, but there were still a lot of movies being pushed forward with these, A-list actors that they were still kind of putting them up for trans roles. And at that point, they're like, yeah, it's not worth the bad press or the blowback that they're getting. Yeah. But that's only 3 years ago.
Right.
And at this point, it's still, there's a lot of, there's still a lot of issues with trans representation. Patty Harrison, a trans actress, just did an incredible interview. I'd recommend everybody to go read it, because she was talking about just the kind of roles that come her way, what you're up against with all the gatekeepers, what people find, they want, people basically want to profit off our stories in some way. So it's like, how do they profit? She really hits a lot of the points that I feel are very close to my heart. I can't get into all of it today. So I just encourage everyone to go take a look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for explaining a lot of that. And it's just frustrating that instead of looking at these roles and casting someone that would actually understand the role and just going into and then not casting it just because it's a PR thing is even more frustrating, right? And especially because there is so much talent in the community, and it's like, how do you get that visibility? And you're going to be one of the pioneers to do it. So the weight of it is all on you, unfortunately, Alexa. But like you mentioned earlier, you're leading the way. A lot of times you look around and you're the first one that had to do and go through things. And so in terms of the film industry, I'm excited to see the work that you're doing and how that's going to perpetuate through. And now Maggie, of course, as Alexa mentioned, you're not only amazing to work with, and you weren't here yet in the pre-room, but Catherine's like, the star is coming. She'll be logging on soon. But clearly you have such just love in your heart in general. But can you tell me why you're passionate about working with the Trans Chorus of LA and, your allyship and why this is such passion for you?
Well, I've always loved music in general. And when I decided to pursue it as a career, one of my goals was to not just do it because I love music. Like, I wanted to create awareness and have a message that would hopefully inspire and change people. And you said earlier, really the goal is to wake everybody else up. And that's always been, for me, the most important thing of why I do what I do. And when I moved to LA, I moved to West Hollywood, and I immediately fell in love with this neighborhood. And I've lived here ever since, because as soon as I got here and I got to LA, and I'm from a small town in Canada. I did live in Nashville for a little bit. But what I loved about this area and LA is I felt like I had never really experienced being in a place where people could just be who they are, and everyone was open and loving. And I felt that here it was much more of that compared to any other place that I've been in. And as I became friends with people here, I started learning a lot more about the trans community and the LGBTQ community. And when it came time to making the music video for Don't Give Up, I decided I wanted to make that story about someone who's struggling with their gender identity. And it was a young person, someone in their youth. And I felt that like now with social media and with all of these things, like it's already difficult being a kid and growing up in these times. And then when you throw on top of that, like someone who is struggling with their gender identity, like the stories I was hearing from my friends and people that I knew, like that can be really difficult, especially when you're not in LA and when you're in like, you know, a small town or another country, it can be a really difficult thing. So that's really what inspired that video. And from there, that's how I met the Trans Chorus of LA. I thought, you know, how cool would it be? Like, what kind of message would it give if I was able to find a choir or a chorus to sing the song with? And if every member was trans, like I could just imagine like a kid in some small town, like seeing that and like, wow, like these people are people I can relate to. And they are up here singing and celebrating, and there's a community of people. And then that's really how the live video for Don't Give Up came about. And ever since, I've been close with, you know, so many people there and hearing their stories and becoming, you know, closer and closer with them and building these relationships. It's really inspiring, and it motivates me, and it inspires me to want to work even harder and to continue telling these stories and to create awareness. And as you said, wake everyone up. And at the end of the day, that's really the goal with my music, is to just continue to tell these stories and create awareness and be a voice for equality and humanity, and not just because I love music, which, you know, at the end of the day, that's how we got here. But I just think it's so important to use that platform to spread a message and to create more awareness.
Wonderful. That's amazing. I'm first of all, I was like, oh, I used to live in West Hollywood. That's actually where I lived when and I loved it. Like you said, it was just such an amazing place. And I loved West Hollywood. I just didn't love LA as a whole.
You know, of course it's not perfect, and there's, you know, but there's so many great parts about it, and I totally get it. You know, LA is crazy.
No, but you're 100%, and kudos to you for sticking it out and saying, no, like, here's what I really want to do. And here's where, unfortunately, you kind of need to be to create that art and to have that visibility. And what you mentioned earlier with representation, it's so difficult. And you're right, for somebody watching that video and then seeing that there's representation and that there's people there singing on TV or in a, you know, it's just kind of like revelatory, and it's really, really meaningful. And I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And so it must be really inspiring then I hear a lot of music, and it makes me feel like aged when I'm like, oh, you know, the music now doesn't have very much meaning and like back in the day or whatever. Right. But it must feel much more fulfilling as an artist to be able to have kind of that motivation and inspiration behind the music itself. Because I know as I've spoken to other musicians, when you're starting out, you kind of don't get to choose, right? You kind of like, well, my PR people, my team is saying that this is going to sell or this is going to be popular. And there's that struggle between trying to be heard and get out there, and then you can do your messaging, or it's almost like a choice. Do you feel like that there's that pull, like you have to do one or the other, or you're just kind of like, screw it, I'm just do what I want to do?
Definitely in pop music, there's always that thing of like, okay, what sells? And like, you want to cater to people. And yeah, like there is, at the end of the day, like a decision you have to make. But my stance was always like, from the beginning, like, this is authentic and it's true to me. And I truly believe, like, when it comes to music, like, you have to be your true and authentic self, and that's what's going to sell. So when I was making that decision, like it was an easy thing. Like, this is what I believe in, and this is who I am, and this is authentically me, and whether or not people take that or not, you know, that's up to them. But that's where I've always stood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And Catherine, we're talking about the film or the music video and song Rebuild and how inspiring it is. And of course, we're all on board here. We're all in a love fest with it because we love it. We know what it means to us and especially to all of you. But do you feel it will inspire people to have more empathy and to maybe ask a question? Because one of the things I always tell people, they ask, it's no secret. There's been a lot of issues for the Asian American community and people are like, what should we do? I'm like, just talk to someone, ask a couple questions and don't be rude. And just, it's okay to make mistakes or think if you have a genuine heart and you're truly asking questions. Like, do you feel this will inspire people to maybe do the same? Like ask questions and build empathy and maybe like get to know someone.
We can only hope, that would happen. Whether it does or not, it depends on a lot of things. But it's important to be visible. It's important to show that I'm just a regular person out there doing the same thing everybody else tries to do, as support their family, enjoy their work, contribute to society, be active in political issues and things to try and make this a better society. Will it create more empathy? I'm not sure whether, that will happen. I would hope so. I would hope that people would gain a better understanding and support for our community. But again, it's the visibility that's really important. We did a video a long time ago, and one of the things that came from that was it was about advertising and seeing the LGBTQ community in advertising. And one of the things came from that was if you can't see yourself, you can't be yourself. So if you don't see other trans people in the world, regardless of what they're doing, you can't really say, gee, I'm, somebody, as you mentioned before, a young child in Nebraska, for instance, that doesn't have the visibility that we do in Los Angeles. And if they see these things, it may give them more support and understanding. Hopefully it would give their parents some more empathy as well towards how what their children are going through. But certainly I hope that happens, that we've touched people, not just within our community, but within the broader community of people who are allies, but are also learning about this. A recent Pew poll showed that 63% of Americans, 63%, that's almost 2/3, support transgender rights. That's, and regardless of party, whether they're a Republican or Democrat. So that there is great support for us, and it's growing and changing. I remember back in the 50s and 60s, I didn't even know what transgender meant. It was, the term was a transsexual at the time, if that was used at all. And we've come a long way in my lifetime, at any rate, and certainly, as Alexa has mentioned, even in the last 3 years or so, we've come a fair way. So the short answer is yes. I hope it does increase empathy. I just hope it increases visibility and lets people see. If one young person sees this and goes, wow, I can do that. I can be a songwriter, or I can be whoever I want to be. That's been great for me. That will have met my.
Yeah. And can you tell me a little bit about the Trans Chorus of LA?
Oh, do you have an hour? The Trans Chorus is a group of transgender nonconforming intersex people who got together about 5 years ago. We were formed by the Gay Men's Chorus in Los Angeles and a trans woman from Cincinnati named Lindsay Deaton, who had the vision to create this chorus and pull people and use their voices to, just show what being trans is in the artistic sense. We've evolved since then. We now have a new artistic director, Abdullah Hall, who is they are gender nonconforming, amazing person. I love them to pieces. And we've evolved into doing music and interacting with other people to do music. Certainly Maggie has been wonderful in that, and her manager, Scott McCracken, has just been amazing to support us. But we are doing now. This last year has been very challenging. As with anybody, we've done a lot of videos and put them together for Pride. This month is crazy with all of the events that are going on. It's wonderful, but it's been hectic. And we want to, as was mentioned before, we want people to go from being victims to victorious. We want people to understand that they don't have to be victims. That's a choice you can make. You can be victorious. You can be successful. You can make an impact in this world, and that's what we're trying to do. So, we're evolving still. We've got a long way to go. We have our ups and our downs, and as I said, this year has been particularly challenging, as it has for everybody, no matter what area you work in. So, we're very happy that we're doing some really cool things right now.
Excellent. Well, last couple questions for everybody. I know our time goes by so quickly here, and I feel like I need to have a 1 hour with each of you separately so we can really delve into the conversation and your lives. Everybody is so wonderful. But Alexa, perhaps you can kind of share. I know we touched on it a little bit in the filmmakers, from filmmaking standpoint, but we're talking about Pride Month. We're talking about, what ways we celebrate and honoring. And of course, it's like, as soon as June is over, then everyone moves on to the next thing. And we all are wrapped up in our own worlds. But I think one of the biggest things that I've come into whenever I have a conversation is there's so many stereotypes that people have about the community as a whole. And there's just a little bit of that fear of maybe because they don't know enough. And of course, Catherine, you can weigh in as well. But what are some of the stereotypes that you feel that people really need to hear, as crazy as it is, but they need to hear, no, this is, we're not XYZ, right? What are some of the things that you really feel that have been the most hurtful to the community?
Well, I don't know if it's hurtful, but it's kind of a predominant. I'm going to, focus to start just on trans women representation, because I think there's kind of a little bit of a conflation with drag culture when it comes to trans women. And it's easy to kind of show being out and being very expressive, but there's a lot of trans women, a lot of my closest friends and circle. There's a great community of trans women here in LA. And, it's just not necessarily how we all come across. And, you kind of run into people and they're like, yes, queen. And you're like, that's not really my vibe. So it's just not really, interacting always with what you think, and you're projecting, again, as I mentioned earlier, just people kind of projecting their idea of what that is rather than reading you, understanding your energy, understanding your look. So, not all of us have or glitter, heavy makeup, that kind of it's not always, that. And I think that's one of the things I see in trans representation, even though it's improving. Pose, for example, great show, huge breakthroughs, but it still kind of treats the trans community as though we exist over here. And it's all this very fabulous thing. And it can be, but it can also be very mundane and very much like other people's lives. And so I think, I'd like people to feel out a little bit more which is which. The other thing I'll mention is just bodies. Really, it's difficult. I would say bodies and identities. Because as Catherine mentioned, the chorus is made up of gender nonconforming people and intersex people and trans people. And it's great. We have to unify because we are a relatively small part of the population. But, any effort to reduce us to one thing is going to be always result in a stereotype. Because some of us are not gender nonconforming. I mean, we are all in the sense that we're trans and we've experienced some dissonance with our assigned birth genders and our, innate sense of who we are. We all share that. But in terms of how we identify, I mean, for me, I've always innately felt I was a woman. That hasn't changed. It doesn't change now. That, non-binary is becoming more culturally accepted. It's just an innate sense of who I am. So, I think just understanding the community is really a spectrum, with a lot of variation. And trans masculine people are going to have very different experiences and issues than trans women. And people who identify as non-binary is another thing. And then with our bodies, it's like, you can't just assume, to this day, it's kind of people assume that being trans means a specific thing. And it really does not. People go through medical transition, opt for different surgeries. Sometimes they do not. And yet there's kind of a predominant, if you come out as trans, it's instantly people are going to start to project what that means to them about your body and what's going on. It can be delicate to inquire about those things. I would just say, don't make really basic assumptions about that. I've been experiencing that. As I said, I transitioned 20 years ago. But to this day, people, if you're being out as trans, it's like then people will just start to project things onto your body or what's going on. So yeah, those are the stereotypes I think are the biggest ones I would personally would like to see changed.
Mm-hmm. Catherine, did you want to weigh in on that as well?
Well, I think that Alexa was, eloquently talked about what the issues are. We're all unique. We all have these things. It used to be, I remember the Rocky Horror Picture Show as an illustration of, that the community that we were supposed to be, and the ballroom scenes and all of that kind of thing is changed, and we're just trying to be regular people and do our jobs and live and get out of life what we can get out of life. Unfortunately, and I agree with Alexa, it's quite different for a trans man than it is for a trans woman. And now we're finding non-binary, gender non-conforming people. It's a whole new layer that's been brought in to work with. Trans men seem to, they have their issues. Certainly testosterone has a much more profound effect on the body and the changes than does estrogen. But estrogen does have some effects. And, everyone's different. We don't have to all look up to the idea, now you're a woman, you've got to be beautiful in the eyes of what Hollywood says is beautiful. And if you're not, then you're really not a woman. And I mean, these are things that we struggle with. Defining what is a woman, what does that mean to everybody in the world? As I don't like the term transgender. I don't think I ever changed my gender. It's always been the same. I've changed my body and that. Everyone's transitioning their whole life. I don't mind the term transition, but I've always felt that I was who I am, and that's a trans woman. And I'm proud to say I'm a trans woman. I don't need to say I'm a woman, which I am, but I like to use that. And again, it comes to my personal bias of being visible and wanting to let people know it's okay to be who you are. I have a dear friend in Toronto who is an author and she does a lot of consulting with businesses about authenticity and letting people be authentic. And she wrote a wonderful book called The Authenticity Principle. And it's about her as an Indian woman coming from a Sikh background and changing to become this emancipated woman in the Canadian culture, and how difficult that was. But it shows, it has so many parallels to us transitioning from where we were before to where we are now. Anyway, it's the kind of thing I think we can all talk about forever. It's really, again, comes down to being visible, accepting who you are, being authentic, and having the opportunity to live that the same as anyone else. Just
Absolutely. And Maggie, as an ally, and I think people would look up to you to the fact that you are doing the work you're doing and everything, but maybe you can share how people can get more educated or knowledgeable, since it seems intimidating sometimes for people to get to know anybody, let alone a community there's so many questions about. Like, how was that like for you, or what advice would you give to people?
I would give is just to listen and to be open. The internet is, of course, a great resource now that people didn't have access to like 30 years ago. And we're lucky in that sense where you could read about people's stories. But I think just to be open and to listen, I think is the most important thing. And I do want to just give a shout out to Alexa, because Scott and I, like, Scott is my manager, as Catherine mentioned. And when we were getting ready to figure out this video, like, it's always stressful. Like, you know, is it going to go okay? And like, do we all share the same vision? And how's it going to end up? Like, it's, you know, it's a gamble, always. So I just remember like the day of the shoot, well, Alexa did so much prep work ahead of time, and like everything was just perfectly organized. And I felt like, oh my God, like I don't have to stress at all. Like I called Scott and I was like, this is like a breeze. Like this was the most organized shoot I had ever, you know, I do a lot of music videos, and this was by far the best experience for me. And Alexa, you were so great at staying on top of everything and organizing this great group of people that you brought in. Like Alexa brought in this squad of people, and they were all so professional. And it really goes to show, obviously, like the fact that you can pull in these amazing people as well. It goes to show who you are, and these people want to work with you as well. And I think the thing I learned too, like even the prep work before, asking everyone's pronouns. Like there was never a director that had asked that before. And for me, it was nice knowing that going into it. And I had never, you know, no one's really ever asked that ahead of time before going into a shoot. So I think even that alone just created an environment where I felt people could just be themselves, and people were more open, and I really enjoyed that part of it. And it, you know, I learned a lot that day too. So I think I feel lucky that this all happened the way that it did, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know you've all been posting on the social media, like, because the music video just launched like a week ago, and there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Is there anything, Maggie, that sticks out in the behind the scenes stories, or anything fun that you want to share, or anything that kind of sticks out in your mind?
It was like basically the property, we fell in love with this location, which is why it was such a tight deadline, because as Alexa mentioned before we started this call, we knew what we wanted to shoot. We knew we wanted to tell this story, and we were trying to figure out this, like, where were we going to shoot this? And there's this place in Malibu that Alexa found. And they were like only available this one day. And it was only like, I think like a few days in advance we had, and we're like, shit, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can swear. We only have like a few days to actually pull this together. Can we do it? And I remember Alexa, there was like a moment on the phone where like, is this possible? Like, is this actually possible for us to do it? And you were like, let's just do it. And we're like, okay. So it ended up being like this amazing spot in Malibu, and it's like in the mountains, and like there's nobody around. And so basically to get around to the different locations, you had to drive like this cool little ATV. But I was, you know, at first it's like scary because like there's like ledges and stuff, but that was, you know, a highlight for me.
Yeah, you got like kind of the amusement park like, feel, you know, as well as like
LA. Like it's just nice to get out and be somewhere new in a new environment. Mm-hmm. That was really fun. And just the crew of people were so great. Carolina ended up, she was one of the girls on set with us that I had known before. Ironically, I didn't even put two and two together until that day. And we're like, oh my gosh, good to see you. But she ended up, you know, stepping up the game. She's a really great dancer, and she was like helping me with the movements and stuff. So it was just really great. Everyone kind of pulled it together and really gave everything. And that was really enjoyable.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And Catherine, do you have any fond memories of the shoot itself? I know we're coming on time.
I want to say one thing just real quick, because there was a one shot of Maggie, because there's a big drop off ledge, and you go up and something smelled so good. It was some plant or something, and there's just a really wonderful shot of Maggie with like the wind blowing through her hair, and I know she was like that plant, and she's just like enjoying life and just taking it in. And unfortunately, you're able to like capture that feeling, but I really remember that moment as like one of the highlights. Sorry, I just had to.
No, I was gonna ask you as well, like some of those things, because I think we all see the finished product, but I know there's so much that goes in between the pages, right? It's so much in between the shots, and there's always a lot of fun in hearing that unfold. And it looked like you were in another completely. I didn't realize it was in LA, because I was like, where did you? I was gonna ask where you shot that. So it really was. It was captured where we couldn't really tell where you were at. But yeah, either. Catherine, do you also have a behind the scenes story to share?
Oh, just the professionalism of the whole crew and the way they worked. It was so wonderful and made me feel so at home as somebody who's not, normally in that kind of an environment. From when I arrived, and immediately the makeup and hairstylist took over and got me ready, and I, just watching Alexa work and seeing how she managed everything was quite amazing. And seeing the film crew, these young women who were lifting these immensely heavy, huge things, and they're pushing them around and moving. It was an education for me, and it was a joy to be there. Everything was it was seamless. From the moment I arrived to the moment I left, I just felt, oh, I'm in great hands here. They're just going to look after me all day, and they did, and it was wonderful. And I can't thank you all enough for what you did, and it was so wonderful to work with Lexa as another trans woman, and Catalina, and then the whole film crew being women. It was amazing, and there were a few token men in there.
You left them on set. You're like, okay.
No, the crew is amazing. I was just blown away by their professionalism and how accommodating they were to help, somebody who's not in this industry to do what we did.
So we've heard from the talent, and from the director's standpoint, was everything as smooth as they're describing?
It kind of was. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I've had my growing pains with some, just experience. Like, fortunately, I've been able to shoot enough now to kind of anticipate what could happen. And this was like doing everything on fast forward, because it was such a tight timeline. And we were dealing with a location, which, as Maggie said, was an adventure, just to kind of do it, and even scouting it, And
it was outdoors. That's always a risk.
Yeah, it was indoor and outdoors. And so, we did, we had all the interiors, and we had a very tight amount of time in the interiors, because that was kind of a separate deal. And then, working with the sunlight, and there were a lot of things, and it was extremely fast schedule. So, the thing is, and I mentioned before, the great thing is to get an opportunity like that and just to be prepared, because for so long we haven't had these opportunities. And so, like, I always feel like I'm going to nail this thing, as best. Like, I have to do it better, because that's what often we're up against. But, I will be honest, in getting to this point, and I'm sure it can happen again, because films are always unpredictable, that, just there's, the bumps in the road do help you, experience. There's no real replacement for experience. In other words, like, I would say all that made today go well were experiences I've had that day go well was the experiences I've had in the past. And, I take anything that doesn't go well, I take it, really deeply to heart. And I want everything to go smoothly. I want everyone to have a great time and feel like it's a creative, joyful experience. And we all know sets cannot function like that. Correct. We've all seen the other side of it. So that's something, it's kind of like Maggie was talking about with her music. That's something I really want to bring to production, And to the whole process is that sense of everyone feeling comfortable and empowered, and and really work with people who have that passion to really to shine. Like, and the crew was fantastic. They were, I mean, incredible. Unfortunately, I've worked with Sarah, the DP, before, so we now have we have a great that's so key.
The rapport and being able to work together.
Rapport,
it's super important.
We understand each other, and that was really. I mean, when I asked Sarah, actually, I was like, "Can we do this by Tuesday?" And she's like, "Okay," because she also pulls together, her team, the camera team.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So she had to do some crewing as well, and so I was like, if she says you can do it, and Maggie can do it, Catherine could, like. Those were like the key pieces, and they were like, okay, we're going for it. And then everything just came together. But, it's great. There's nothing like experience, and there's nothing like having a team that you have.
Yeah. Well, it actually sounded pretty seamless. Yeah. It sounded pretty seamless. That's amazing. So final round is just how do you celebrate Pride Month, and, what does it mean to you? Of course, we are live here, and this is June. So we're right in the middle of it, and we'll start with Maggie and then just kind of go back around.
Next weekend to some events with some friends. And really, for me, this is the biggest celebration, is this video and releasing this video. And that's, for me, the biggest celebration.
Excellent. And Alexa?
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, this video, like for me, the project, I'm as an artist, like releasing a project, getting to talk, have this conversation, that, and, helping Catherine tell her story. Yeah. That is Pride Month. Like for me, like the biggest way to celebrate. I'm not really a big parade person. I just wanted to say too, though, like the thing about Pride is that it really does come from a time where people really weren't at all free to be out in public and to kind of do this almost like a demonstration, and we're here and let people know. And I don't think it's as necessary, but it's important to remember why it exists and what it's for. And so I just want to send like love out to everybody who will be out and celebrate, and just tell them, try not to have too many bad drinks and avoid as much drama as possible.
Great advice. Catherine?
Oh, it's a very hectic, busy time for the chorus. We've produced a few videos that are being shown, because a lot of the prides are virtual this year. We had to do recordings and send them off to the prides. And so this weekend is really big at the LGBT Center in LA, and we're involved in that. And our artistic director, Abdul Hall, is emceeing that whole thing, and they're pretty amazing what they do. And Pride goes on. In fact, Palm Springs Pride is not till November because it's too hot right now to hold it. So they hold it in November. There's San Diego's in July. So we're doing a lot of things, but it's a very busy time, celebratory time, and a wonderful time for the community. It was amazing. One last thing. On the 15th, which was Tuesday. The Abbey in WeHo opened up at midnight because the governor had said starting on the 15th. There was a lineup starting at 9 o'clock to get in. It was packed at midnight with people just celebrating Pride and being there. It was quite amazing to see on TV, to see all these people. So Pride is about, just about being proud and celebrating the fact that we are becoming more visible, and that's important. And we are rebuilding our lives to be that visibility. So I can't thank Alexa and Maggie enough for allowing me to be a small part of what they are doing and to show our story to the world. It's wonderful. And thank you, Mimi, for having us here and sharing argues.
You're so welcome. And I'm the one that's honored. Thank you so much, Catherine, Alexa, and Maggie. It's such a wonderful conversation. I learned so much, but I also, this is how I'm celebrating Pride. So thank you for being a part of that so that I can help share the story, help with the visibility. And I will link all of the stuff here, everyone's Instagrams and Facebooks and all the social media, but also the music videos so we can all get inspired and we can all rebuild, because I think it reaches all of us and it's all important for all of us to, kind of find that connectivity. So thank you, ladies, so much for sharing. And I will say goodbye to all the Facebook people out there, but bye, Facebook people. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.